Standalone crew. We are live, and my goodness, do I have a special treat for you today. When I started the Standalone podcast and just connecting with an audience greater than my organization, it was important to me to share like all the things that make us unique, that make us rare. And when I think of people and the conversations that I've met in my journey, you know, there's certain people that, really pull on your heartstrings to what you know to be true. And my guest today, he is going to drop massive amounts of gold onto your life today. So I'm so blessed and honored. I have the privilege of introducing him to you. He is a former head of global marketing for Bloomberg. He trains Fortune 500 companies. So who does Bloomberg? Who does JP Morgan? Who do they call to help their team get better? His name is Chuck Garcia. And he right now is the host of a show, A Climb to the Top, where he interviews phenomenal people and their transformative stories. But also, he teaches at Columbia University. He teaches engineers on the skills that they need to be able to thrive in the world. And today we're going to really touch on leadership today. And I love that you are so well versed in this. We're going to tie it into marketing too, because leadership and marketing, they really go head to head, and really they align themselves with one another to make us successful in business. But Chuck, what makes you really special is that you have swam with the sharks of Wall Street and you were not eaten alive. Instead, you came out thriving. So 25 years in Wall Street, some people won't last 25 hours in that, right? It is a tough industry. I would say the toughest. And so as I introduce you today, we are in the presence of rare gold. So I just thank you for your time today. And as we dive into these topics deeply, the first thing I want to ask you is just to share with us. You've built and you have this great book, A Climb to the Top. Why in today do we have to still climb to the top? Because it's a noble cause for us to want to get to the top. But then why do we also have to be mindful of the person we are becoming in our journey to the top? To introduce you, I would love for you to open up with that, because this is really just the point of life, isn't it?
Indeed it is. And Sabrina, thank you very much. I am so grateful for the wonderful introduction, and I hope I will live up to or try to exceed those expectations. But what you're describing, and when I look at my students, I look at my clients, I look at the world around me, what I see is an amazing abundance of idealism. There are problems in the world, and so many people just are passionate about wanting to change it. However, what happens is I see them go out in the world and they come back a couple of years later and I ask, how are you making out with that change? Oh, it's a lot harder than I thought. Well, how come? And they begin to describe it. So I learned from when I was early on teaching and coaching, I began to think there's something different here, but we have the mindset wrong. And I stumbled years ago across a quote from the 11th century Persian poet called Rumi that said, yesterday I was clever and I wanted to change the world. We pause for dramatic effect. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. What Rumi has led us all to contemplate is he's helped us to redefine what it means to be smart. Being smart isn't going out, loading your guns, and getting out there and fighting your battles every day because you care so much about the world. I get it and I respect it. But I think the best thing we can do to climb to the top of our mountain, whatever that is, a mountain of happiness, success, prosperity, who are we to say what you want at the top of your mountain, if I can use that metaphor? But what I recognize is if you go unprepared, unplanned, untrained, and lacking the inspiration to get out of your comfort zone and climb it, it is a damn difficult thing to accomplish without that assistance.
I love this. And in your book, you touch on this, and especially you've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, right? So this
Yeah.
is the highest freestanding mountain in the world, right?
Well,
And
that's Everest. This is the highest. I have climbed the highest in Africa, and I have climbed the highest in Europe.
I love it. I love it. And you also take people on these climbs to really push them to their limits, because before they get to the top, you say it's the hardest. You're on your hands and knees, and everything inside of you is saying, like, what am I doing right now? But then you get to that victory, right? So if you could share with us, because you talk about a base camp when you're starting the climb, the base camp where you get your supplies in order and you really have the right people around you, you assemble the right team. How important is having the right base camp to us to get to the top?
If you can compare the base camp to the foundation of a house that you're building, recognize that if you have a weak foundation and you have a beautiful, everything on top is beautiful. You've got a mat, great kitchen, great living room, all of that. Yet somehow the rain comes and you got a leak and the foundation, it all sinks. Base camp is your foundation, but the most important part of base camp is not just getting the tools, getting rested, and getting in the right headspace. Believe it or not, the best part of base camp, Sabrina, is bonding with your mates, is the recognition that all of us is better than any one of us. And when you lay back, and I remember each mountain, I've been on 7 expeditions, and every time I've been at base camp, I just take a deep breath. I recognize that everyone here is in the service of my success, but I also recognize I am here in the service of theirs. Mountaineering is a very unselfish thing, in spite of what people think that we got this death wish. It's not like that. Mountaineering is when we coalesce and we unify our efforts around a common mission. Not unlike, Sabrina, what you do in your company and with your team. What are you really doing? You are coalescing around something that is important to everyone on that team. And at base camp, what we're doing is we're getting to know each other, assuming we don't know each other. We're getting to see the personalities, because when you start climbing that mountain, you're connected. You have a harness and you have a rope. And just as what's a picture for those who are watching behind me, look how we are tied to each other's success. If the mountaineer in the front goes down and I'm the one in the back, I'm going down. The most important part of that is the trust with your partners, number one. And base camp is the opportunity to establish the trust on the inevitability that if something goes wrong, who's got your back? Your mate. Doesn't matter what the equipment is, assuming that you've gotten through the weather and you're feeling okay. Base camp, like your career camp, like when you have a meeting, your Monday morning meetings, that's your base camp.
I love this, and for people to understand, like, that is why leadership is a call to greatness, right? This is why you want to have great leaders leading the call to action for other people to rise up in leadership, because, if everyone has each other's backs, the team can do more together. And this is something that I've experienced, in my life, and that anyone that's in charge of a large group of people, they really understand the importance of people in their organization, right? So if you think, I can't think of an environment more shark-like than Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
So how did you really start to understand? Because a lot of people get into sales, they get into business to elevate themselves, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the quicker we find out, wait, I can't do this by myself, almost it's like the faster we climb to the top. So how did you come to terms with that in this like shark infested waters of Wall Street, so that you can stay in this business for 25 years and now they call you back to teach them? That's the ultimate compliment.
Indeed it is, and I'm very grateful for that. Well, Sabrina, my career started as a salesman. I started in this little company that no one ever heard of called Bloomberg. And when I told people I was going to this company, like, who is he? What are you, crazy? I never heard of him. I was the 190th employee. And Bloomberg, to anyone listening, you may know he was the mayor of New York for 3 terms. He was also a presidential contender and was on the debate stage once or twice in this last presidential campaign. But he is also the smartest, most generous man I've ever known, bar none. But the reason I say that, I was fortunate to have joined a company where I learned the importance of culture. Even though Mike was a dyed-in-the-wool Wall Streeter, the company that he assembled was rather unconventional in its approach to how he saw all of us in our careers succeeding. He was so of the mindset of the unification of our efforts, and that if we work together, and this just wasn't a bunch of sayings on the wall, he meant it, he said it, we believed it, and we lived it. That all of us, like a good base camp, like a good mountaineering team, we are all here in the service of each other's success. If on Wall Street you take the attitude that it's just about me, you'll do okay. You may climb mountains, but at Bloomberg and Sabrina, so my first really big company was, oh my God, you mean there's other people out there that care about me? And they care about me because the guy who was leading this mountain team, he didn't talk about it. He just was it. He lived it, and he led by example. So what do we do in companies? We tend to model our behaviors among the leader. And so what we did, we simply modeled his behaviors. He came to us. Are you guys okay? What do you need? What can I help? And he even said once, my job is to get you what you need and get out of your way. He didn't micromanage. He was so awesome in what I learned about give the people what they need in order for them to be productive, and then give them the space to succeed or fail, and let them know if you're in a jam and we're all good. But the first thing he said to me, one time I made a mistake, he said, if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. So it was almost get out there and screw it up. What a luxury that was early on in my career to learn from someone who gave us the freedom to screw up and try and retry and retry. And as long as you just stayed focused and on the mission, some days were better than others. But the important part is I learned that this thing we do in the service of others' success. On the mountain climb, we call it the law of reciprocity, that if you want to succeed, help someone else to climb their mountain, and they will in turn help you to climb yours. That was my Bloomberg experience. I wish when I was in college, somebody taught me that. They didn't.
I love this, Chuck, and you know what I found in business, getting to know a lot of very powerful people, is that the people at the top, that is the heart, that is the culture of the organization. And so the team thrives off of that. And so we have to work on those things, right? And so let's get into that a little bit. Like, what are these things? Because first things first, you got to bring the skills, right? You got to bring those base level skills. And for a lot of people, like if you're behind in the skills, you got to level up with your skill, right?
Yep.
Then the next level of climbing to the top is like, we've got to fine tune. It isn't about the intelligence of the data. It's about the intelligence of the people, because our ability to communicate is so key in our success. What role have you seen in your history about communication and how important that is to have that skill cultivated within you so that you could lead an organization to the top, lead your people, lead your team to the top?
Well, what you're really saying, Sabrina, is you are underscoring that you're redefining what it means to be smart. Because conventionally, what we know about being smart when we go to school, so for all of you who are in high school or college, I recognize you are likely in the model of cram, exam, then regurgitate.
Yep.
Never, ever in my career, and probably in yours, were we forced to cram, exam, regurgitate, and then 7 days later, we forgot 90% of what it is we were supposed to remember. Business is the complete opposite. And I wish somebody had told me. So there's so many things here, like, why doesn't anybody tell us the way it really is?
We're doing it right now,
We're
Chuck.
doing it now.
We're
But
doing it right now.
yeah, and Sabrina, what I learned along the way, what I recognized is I think when it comes to the hard skills, most people are pretty good at it. There's a certain, particularly if you're in a profession that requires licensing, certifications, you got to pass the exams.
Yeah.
I get that. And if it's cramming exam to get there, understood. But here's where it changes. That's your left brain. That's your analytical side. You got to sharpen the saw. You got to be good at what you do. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be good enough. And I don't mean that to lower the bar on the skills. No matter what you do, I think it was Ernest Hemingway say, we are all apprentices in a craft that none of us will ever master. So there's a certain humility when it comes to the hard skills because you don't know everything, but you likely know other people who do. So you always have help. Here's where the magic happens, Sabrina, and this is why I do what I do now. When I considered how I climbed my career mountain, and I certainly didn't do it alone, I had a lot of help. But the important part is, why did people help me? The only thing I could think of when I reflected on to your question, what did I do that would cause anybody to stop what they're doing in the service of my success? And it came down to three things, and it's called the CTR factor. C for credibility, establishing your credibility. Your credibility moves to the T. You establish trust. A, number one. If you are brilliant and you don't have trust, you got nothing.
Yes.
And then what do those two lead you to? They lead you to R, to the respect. And once you command respect, you ask somebody for something, they don't even think about it anymore. So as we climb this mountain, and this was coined in a book by my friend named Suri Surinder, who wrote a book called CTR Factor. And as I thought about that, and he came onto my radio show and he explained it, and I said, yeah, that's it. So from the point of view of what any of our listeners, what should you think about in your career ascent? Establishing credibility, trust, and respect. They don't come easily, and you got to earn it. No one's going to give it to you. How do you earn it? You earn it every day. And the best way to earn it, the first thing, aligning your actions and your words. The moment you misalign, an old quote by Carl Jung, you are what you do, not what you say you do. And I hear all these people telling me all these things are going to do. Half of them don't even do it. Yeah. Not a formula to build CTR. Now let's get into the modern world. Here is where we are today and what advice we can impart. Take a look at LinkedIn, which is the largest business network that all of us use. Sabrina, you and I are connected on LinkedIn. My guess is there are other people. You can link both of us in if you hear it. Every year, they publish a list of the top hard skills and the top soft skills for career success. Hard skills are what you'd expect. Cloud computing, artificial intelligence, just the modern world. But now, take note of the top 5 soft skills. The number 1 soft skill on LinkedIn. Now, this is a compilation of what thousands of employers put in their job descriptions and what they seek. Number 1, creativity. Number 2, persuasion. Think about what you guys do, Sabrina. Number 2, that you need people to persuade someone to buy me. Number 3, collaboration. Collaboration, just working with somebody. Look how important that is to an employer. Anybody out there, have you taken a course on collaboration? If you haven't, I suggest you learn how to be a good collaborator. Number 4, adaptability, particularly important to the Silicon Valley folks. You're constantly being disrupted. So it's a series of adaptations of the business model. And number 5, my favorite, emotional intelligence. Redefining what it means to be smart, recognizing the importance of empathy. And I think what I did, I like to think I did, I sought always first to understand where I am with somebody. And then I sought to be understood. That's a law of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey. I want to say that again. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. We live in a world of outrage where everybody's got a bullhorn. Republicans, Democrats, whatever. I don't care about your political affiliation, but everybody's screaming. To those who are listening, don't scream. Take a deep breath. If you're not connecting or you don't understand someone, stop talking. Seek to understand. Help. If you don't agree with somebody, keep working at it. Help me to understand your point of view. I don't agree with you, but that's only because I'm not understanding your point of view. The importance of communication works two ways. It helps us first to be able to be clear and concise about what we communicate, so that somebody on the other end has the benefit of understanding what it is we're actually trying to say. And I think, Sabrina, what saddens me in this world is there is a very big mismatch, because all of this technology, I think, has diminished our capacity to listen and to understand each other. We're all in a hurry to tell the world how much we hate or love or whatever that is. So I see communication, and it's my own bias, and certainly it's the book that I wrote called The Climb to the Top, which is a communications framework. And I wrote that for the benefit of so many people who have gone to school and have joined in their careers, and they have been misguided. They got the wrong advice.
Chuck, this is so powerful. For people to just understand that we're being taught this stuff about, stand your ground, but it also is about that quote is so powerful. Seek first, not to just shove who you are to people, but just as you sit and listen to people talk, the power behind that is that you start to understand them. And you can't help to influence someone if you don't understand them. And it's the same is true for us. Like, how much time do we spend with ourselves? Like, why do I believe that? Why do I subscribe to that thought? And if we want to change, if we want to transform who we are, then we have to really understand why we used to think the way we used to think, so that we can move ourselves in a new place. And I hope everyone got what you just, downloaded into us. I think it's so powerful. And you talk about, in your book, you use the example of Steve Jobs. And I love this because you talked about he was the smartest guy in the room always, but he wasn't screaming from the mountaintop, I'm the smartest guy in the room, hear me roar. He spoke with three qualities: simplicity, energy, and conviction.
Indeed.
Can you speak to that? Because a lot of people today, they're literally screaming from the mountaintop their views. But what we have to do is just start to understand, right? So, how do we do this with energy, like a positive energy, not this is my opinion, hear me roar? We also want to have conviction in what we believe. There's nothing wrong with that. I have the best conversations with people I don't necessarily agree with. What I'm
Right.
assessing is their conviction.
Yeah.
So how do we do this? How do we tie in these three things of simplicity, energy, and conviction to become a better leader?
Well, I want to point to I'm going to sidetrack just a touch to help bring home this point. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who didn't speak your language? So I know you're from Canada, and you've probably been in the presence of people who speak French. I don't speak French, but what I've noticed, Sabrina, is sometimes when one person who speaks, say, English, is in the presence of someone who doesn't speak very good English, they speak French, what does the English speaker do to try to be understood? They speak louder. And if they can't, and if they're still not landing, the volume goes up even higher. I said, do you want a cheeseburger? Well, they're not deaf. They just don't speak your language. So you're going to have to find another way to communicate. I feel, Sabrina, this is the world that we're in, that if somebody doesn't agree with my political point of view, just say it louder. I believe that all Republicans are a bunch of bums. Okay, well, you've turned up the volume, but that doesn't convince me. Right. What Steve Jobs had the amazing ability to do, he spoke with an incredible amount of clarity. And he spoke in a way, when you saw him on stage, He was the master of speaking to a chapter that I devoted in the book called The Rule of Three. And the Rule of Three states that it's the observation that human beings, and it goes back to the days of the Greeks, and it's a rhetorical technique that when you speak to somebody, if you're going to eat a bowl of Rice Krispies, you know how you're going to feel? Snap, crackle, and pop. And when we read to our children, what are the stories that we read? Three blind mice, Three Little Pigs, the story of the Three Musketeers. And when you watched Aladdin and the genie said, how many wishes are you going to get? You're going to get three. Steve Jobs spoke in the Rule of Three. And every time he came out with the iPod, the iPad, it didn't matter whatever it was, he was the master of simplicity. When he held up his iPhone, he didn't say this iPhone is matter, antimatter, nuclear transformer that is laced with A, B, C, and D and put a man on the moon. He didn't do that at all. He said the first thing with that iPhone, you can now put 1,000 songs in your pocket. Just listen to the simplicity of that metaphor. 1,000 songs in my pocket. For those of us that grew up before the days of the phone, that was inconceivable. But he was spoken metaphor and he spoke in simplicity. He never had to scream or raise his voice because he was landing in a way that was understood given the simplicity and clarity of his language. Unfortunately, many people believe that they have to impress someone with their impressive language or their complex use of words. Steve Jobs' brilliance was taking something very complex and communicating it in such simple tones that a child could understand. And that's how it works. We should all, and I encourage everyone, go to YouTube, pull up a Steve Jobs video on the introduction of any of the Apple products, and you will be amazed at the clarity and the simplicity. Do not strive to lace in complex words. And one other thing, Sabrina, I want you to hear what I'm about to say, and I want everyone who is listening to hear my words. Here I go. So, I was thinking it's kind of sort of like this pandemic, it's, it's like, yeah. And I hear people speaking to me like that. What's like, yeah? And you mean what? And it's kind of good, it's kind of bad.
What did you even say?
Well, unfortunately, Sabrina, I have people that come into my Gravity and they ask me a question and what they're doing, what we often do is when we don't know what to say, we don't stay silent. We just say the first noise that comes to mind. And what are those? They're called filler words and verbal crutches. And the biggest offenders are so, kind of, sort of, I mean, and yeah. What the heck? Let's just pollute our language with these words because it's better than the silence. That's crazy. Think of it the other way. Think unconventionally. If I ask you a question, what are you having for dinner tonight? So, I thought I'd have a cheeseburger. How about a cheeseburger? Simple. No so's, no likes. Imagine, Sabrina, if you were in a meeting with someone for 30 minutes and they did that, how would you feel?
I would feel exhausted.
Right, exactly. Exhausted. And sometimes I put my clients up on video when we're preparing for a speech. And I once had a client, very brilliant guy, in a 15-minute speech, he said 54 times. And he watched it on video and his face turned red. He was just incredibly embarrassed. And I said, look, it's all good. You just didn't know it and nobody had the courage to tell you that. But what you cannot do, you can't get in front of the shareholders in 2 months as we're prepping for this and do 54 times in 15 minutes. You will lose them in the first 7 seconds. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are. You have polluted and you have caused self-inflicted harm because you have chosen not to eliminate all the useless things in your language. So Steve Jobs, Barack Obama, there are many great models out there. Just listen to the clarity and the simplicity and notice what it is devoid of. So I think to all of our listeners, it starts with, what are you going to eliminate from your language? And that helps you to develop the good language. Let's eliminate the verbal crutches and the filler words. Replace them with a second or two of silence. That's called the power of the pause. Comedians know it well because when they're delivering a punchline, they pause, bam, and deliver it. It's timing. And I want everyone to recognize, I don't expect you to go out and be comedians, but we can learn a lot from people that use these techniques to sharpen our use of language. So eliminate the filler words. It's like, get rid of all these. Begin to choose your words carefully, work on your timing, resist the impulse to blurt out your filler words, and speak calmly or with enthusiasm. But the minute you scream, your credibility, your trust, and your respect are diminished. And if you diminish those three long enough, nobody's going to know what to do. They won't deal with you.
Yeah, I think this is so powerful, Chuck, because especially in selling, you have to understand when you're dealing with body language, when you're dealing with communication, so much of our communication isn't verbal, right? So you break it down, and this is actually something I go into a lot of, in-depth analysis with my team to really break down. We have 7 seconds to make a first impression. And so what you're saying is so important because you don't want to pollute that for 7 seconds where someone is gauging, are you the kind of person that I want to do business with, right? So when we are having that 7 seconds to make that first impression, how much of that is verbal? How much of that is nonverbal? And what can we do to heighten the level of trust in that first response that we get with our customer, with our team member, with an interviewee? Even if I'm new and I'm interviewing for a job that I want so dearly, I have to master this art of communication. Otherwise, my skills will not have a place to flourish.
Indeed. And whether, for everyone listening, whether you were walking in an interview or you're with a prospect, put yourself in the room and now watch the other person walk in. And the first lesson here that you will notice is the body speaks before your mouth even opens. You walk into a room, the human mind processes a first impression in about 250 milliseconds. That is faster than the blink of an eye. The blink of an eye is 400 milliseconds. That's part of the defense mechanism as we evolved as human beings to keep us away from predators, or really to read a room. So now 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, what is happening between that 250 milliseconds and that 7 seconds? That's the time for the listener or the viewer to recognize what just walked into the room. What's the vibe? What tone did you set when you walked into that room? I have seen, Sabrina, people walk into meetings looking miserable, yawning, they're on their phone. They don't even look up, even just a courtesy, good morning. Sometimes I want to say, put the damn phone down and recognize you're in a meeting with other people. And this is what you're doing. Are you so busy and stressed that you can't put it aside for 2 seconds and say hello? You've created the mood. You set the tone, and in the mind of the person who is viewing you, they are making judgments about you in the vocabulary of personal judgments. Oh, look at this guy. He's so stressed. He didn't look at me in the eye. He didn't shake my hand. He didn't even smile. So what he or she is doing is telling us right then and there, without saying a word, I have no interest in being with you. None. I never said it. Oh, did I? I did say it. I said it through my body language. And in the book, Sabrina, I have 5 different categories of body language that I describe. 4 of them are negative. So unless you recognize the most important part, and if you're watching, the most important part of your body language, First is your eyes. Your eyes, make them smile. Second is your hands, that your hands are always out front, never behind you because you're concealing something. That's what the human mind does. We're afraid of what we can't see. Seeing is believing because that's how we grew up. I don't believe half the crap I hear, but I tend to believe 100% of what I see. And if I see you miserable, I got misery. And you know what you're doing? You're giving the misery to everyone else. So you know what that meeting's going to be? 30 minutes of misery. I think we owe it to ourselves to raise the standard of those low expectation, boring meetings. This is your time. Make it worth not only your time, make it worth other people's time. You don't have to go in there like a clown, backslapping, saying jokes, but come in and recognize, good morning, Sabrina. You okay? You don't have to be friends. Hey, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that. We're only going to take 30 minutes before we get the agenda going. Good morning. Get everybody talking. Get them involved. So that's the body language, Sabrina. It is 93% of what we communicate non-verbally. 55% physically of, I see you and your beautiful black jacket. Me too. I was very intentional. I wanted a black jacket with a light background. I chose pink. Just bring out my feminine side. I like pink, and it works, I think, with black. I like it. So that's how I want it to be viewed. As we think about now when we speak, it's tone, it's tonality. Because often people will say, I know what he said. I just didn't like the way he said it. Okay, so now we're talking about that's what they remember. They don't even remember what you said. They remember how you made them feel. Because when we walk away from the meeting, we're not recounting the minutes of the meeting. We're recounting how we felt when we were in the presence of others. And what we remember are the highs and the lows. Who were the people that inspired us that we look up to? You remember them. And who are the people you're going to avoid for the next meeting? You remember them. The ones in the middle, could be, they could go either way, but that's what body language does. It leaves a permanent, indelible mark in our mind about the way that others have chosen intentionally to interact with us.
Wow. Oops, I just did it.
Hey, I do too. Oh, whoa, we all do, and it's okay. It's fine. Just be mindful.
Find yourself and correct it, right? Get back on path, but you won't be able to correct what you don't know to look for. So I love that we're doing this to bring an attention, awareness to all these subtle things that they seem like they're small things, but they add up to the whole. And for a lot of us, when we're not experiencing success in our life, we think it's this massive thing that we're doing. And I always tell my team, no, it's this little thing that you're slightly off course and you keep on doing that. And you get so far off the baseline that now it's like, we got to bring you back. And, just to touch on what you had said, Chuck, it's so powerful because when someone comes into a room and they have their phone and they're like this,
right,
what they're really doing is they're so concerned about how they look to the other person because it's like, I'm busy, I'm important, but great communicators, great leaders, they're more concerned about the other person, right?
No
And
question.
you mentioned this, there's a powerful part in your book where it talks about when someone is speaking, the greatest speakers aren't concerned about like the words that they're using. They're really concerned, did the audience receive my message in the way that I want them to receive it? And, how do we do this, especially in business, especially in sales? A lot of people want to be entrepreneurs. And if you don't have that ability, one of those top soft skills to persuade people,
right,
how do we develop this so that we're not just so self-absorbed in how we look, but we can actually turn the attention to our audience and say, are you receiving what it is that I'm looking to give to you right now?
Yeah, what you're describing is it's a feedback loop and a mechanism that we need to build into the way we communicate. And the reason I say that, I think early on in my career, when I started watching before I stepped on stage and gave speeches, I watched other people give speeches, and the ones that really turned me off were the ones who were self-indulgent and made that speech all about them. Because the interesting part is I knew all about them because all I had to do was pull up LinkedIn, and our resumes are on display every minute. So what sometimes what they're saying is they recount for the next 20 minutes a laundry list in a sequence. Look at all the things that I've done. Okay, well, the challenge to an audience is getting them to notice and then getting them to care about whatever it is you're saying. And what do people care about? Themselves. They care about their careers, they care about their families, they care about their health. If I were stepping on stage and I recounted all of my successes, one, it's boring. Two, it's self-illusory and it's self-indulgent. And why would anybody care? The trick, Sabrina, and it's so simple, yet we're not mindful of it. What do we want? And this is, I ask myself, everyone on my radio show, I go through this every time I step on a stage, every time I walk into a meeting. This is a lesson for everybody. Before you walk into that meeting, you will have an audience. You may think you're only there to inform. You're not. You're there to inspire, and you're there to score points in your career. Think of it that way. And it doesn't have to be selfish, but it's your intention about how you want to leave that room. Ask yourself, what do I want my audience to think? What do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? For those insurance sales, what you're talking about, what I hope the good ones that have sold me insurance, they spoke to my family, the health of my children. They didn't talk about themselves. They talked about the love and the protection necessary so that when I go to work every day, I know my family is taken care of. So I got a life insurance policy so that if I died on the millions of miles that I've flown, my wife is taken care of, that my children are healthy. Speak to their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations. We don't need to do that because we're not that interesting in light of what we're trying to accomplish. So remember that. What do you want them to think? What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? Based upon that question, that three-part question in the rule of three, now jot down your agenda. What do I want them to think? What do I want them to feel? What do I want them to do? Bang, 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 bang. Okay. PowerPoint, whatever it is you're going to bring with you, everything should be reflected so that by the time that meeting is done, you're leaving your audience with a call to action. I want you, and I'm transparent, to buy my insurance policy so you can protect your car, your life, your home. That's what I want you to do. Be honest about it. But in order to do that, you gotta move them in the heart, and you gotta get a little bit of the mind. You gotta get a mind-body connection. So you want them to feel that you're credible, that you care about me. Cool. And once you get by there, now you gotta get into the logic. But what you know, Sabrina, I'm sure what you find in your clients, they buy on emotion, and then they support that decision with logic. So if people buy, we like buying on emotion because we want to feel connected to the thing that we're purchasing. We don't want it just to be a transaction. We want it to be that I feel an emotional connection to you. I feel invested in the thing that I'm spending money on. And I want to know that I've done the right thing and that I've done it with a trusted partner. That's how I want people to think about that, because you don't know who to trust. So you got to earn it.
Yeah, and innately, like we listen to what our gut is telling us. And so you have to tap into those things that are nonverbal, because that's what's communicating louder than the words that we choose to speak. So I love what you're saying here. You also talk about, tying this all so nicely together so we can just wrap this up for everyone that is, looking to climb their mountain, right? You talk about foreign languages in a speech that I watched of yours, and I love this because I think the number one foreign language of the United States of America is the language of leadership.
No question.
I think that it needs to be taught. I think that our children need to learn this. When I look at my children, I want them to be one thing, And it's not a doctor, it's not a CEO, it's a leader. I want my children to be a leader. And so, what is the language of leadership? If you can tie this up for us nicely, and because we're climbing to the top of whatever we're doing, if we're in business, even if we work somewhere for someone else, you still have to climb to your top. You still have to be the best at what you do. Never ever underestimate how powerful that climb to the top is for your life, right? But as we climb, what is the language of leadership to help us get to the top?
Yeah, the languages of leadership is rooted, or the speech that I gave, Sabrina, thank you for pointing that out. I grew up, my dad was a linguist, so I grew up with foreign languages. My parents are Brazilian. I grew up in a home where Portuguese was our first language, and I learned Spanish along the way. So I'm an advocate for learning foreign language, but what I found in the schools as I was growing up, 93% of Americans take a foreign language, and 92% of them say they never use it after they leave high school. So I thought about that. I said, well, is there another language we should be teaching? And this abstract thing, the language of leadership, landed with me because I felt that the career ascent that I enjoyed was once I figured out, oh my God, there's all this misalignment out there. The boss says this and everyone else heard that. What? You said A and they heard B? And then next thing you know, we're 6, 9, 10 months into a project and it's all screwed up. And it's not screwed up because anyone isn't technically proficient. It's screwed up because what was communicated was not what was heard. So I said, my God, the key to business, yeah, you got to have the right app. You got to be a good accountant, a good finance, whatever that is. Sabrina, the biggest gap was that people were communicating, but they were not seeking first to understand, and then they weren't checking, am I understood? And the reason I use mountaineering as that is there's a protocol when we climb a mountain. There's a protocol. If you and I were climbing together, there's a language that you and I speak that is always about speaking and acknowledgement. And if I say to you, Sabrina, are you ready to climb? And let's say I'm leading. I will not move until you say to me, climb on. Honest to God, I would be like a donkey. I would stand there because you haven't given me the signal that allowed me to understand that you're ready. Mm-hmm. This simple metaphor, are you ready to climb? Climb on, Chuck. Now we're good. That is severely lacking in the business world. Somebody gives an order, and if somebody doesn't do it, they scream louder. And if that doesn't work, you scream a little bit louder. And if that doesn't work, you threaten them. That doesn't work in 2021. This is all about speaking with purpose and listening with intent. My advice to everyone listening, and Warren Buffett said it on the Columbia stage one day, when somebody asked him, Mr. Buffett, what's the best advice you can give? The audience was thinking, follow your dreams, chase your passion, blah, blah, blah. Nothing. Here's what he said. Improve your communication skills, and you will increase your value in the marketplace by 50%. Here's the richest man at one of them in the top 5, whatever he is. This is the advice he's giving. He's not saying work harder, get an MBA, nothing. He's talking about how do we increase our value. Our careers are based on the currency that we bring to our company. The currency is our value. We build our currency on credibility, trust, and respect. That is how companies value us, by what they pay us. Everyone wants to make more money. Don't have to listen to me. I urge you, listen to Warren Buffett. He and I and you, Sabrina, we are encouraging people in our world. The best investment they can make is in themselves. Forget the car, the house. Yeah, that's all good. If you could take the money, get self-help. I would recommend, I certainly hope people read A Climb to the Top, but if they don't, my Bible, Sabrina, which I'm sure you'll appreciate. When I was 23 years old, I read a book called How to Master the Art of Selling by Tom Hopkins. The book is biblical to me. The other Bible to me was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. These are the 2 books that I wish I had my freshman year in college, because it would have completely changed the way that I chose to educate myself. And that is my call to action to everyone listening. How to win friends and influence people will have more importance in your career. And it's not about faking it. It's nothing like that. It's about learning to recognize that yesterday I was clever and I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. Change yourself. Be intentional and strategic about what you are going to learn. And if you do that, take a step at a time, be a little bit patient. You got a lot going on. Do that, and you will climb not just to the mountain of success. That's not what I want people to do. I want them to climb their mountain of happiness. I don't define that, but only you, the listener, can decide what's that happiness mountain. It's a change mountain. Change yourself, and only then can you change the world.
I love this. And just to summarize, you know, it is when people talk about the struggle to give us that happiness and that feeling of conquest, you know, if you could just speak on that to summarize that, like, why do we have to be okay with change, be okay with going through those hard, you know, peaks and valleys that we suffer through to get to the top, so that we can sit there and understand that it's the pursuit of happiness. It's not happiness, I'm happy and this is it, it's done. It's just we're pursuing it. And that's where the happiness lies.
Yeah, well, you're speaking metaphorically of the journey, that I see too many people not enjoying the journey because they live in very much the world of, well, I'll be happy when I get the other car. I'll be happy when I get a bigger house. I get that. And I don't minimize or diminish how much people want those things. But I think when the adage that if you don't change yourself, the world is going to change you. So who's in charge? You want to be in charge of your destiny, or you want the world to come and change you? And I've seen the world change people. They become moody and aggressive, and just because they're so angry at the world. Okay, that's a choice. I appreciate if there's other mental health issues. I'm not diminishing that. But I think most of us, under reasonable circumstances, have a choice. I choose to change myself. And if I don't like something about myself, I got to go change myself. Or the world's going to change you. Be in charge of your life. Don't let the world blow you around. Don't let the world determine your next step. You are always deciding your next step. Your most important decision is that next step. Are you going to do what the rest of the world tells you to do? If your heart tells you to go left, go left. Drown out the noise. Nobody knows what's right for you except you. So that's my advice. Along the journey, you're going to be beaten down, beaten up, yelled at, screamed at. I understand that. I urge you, and you can see for those in the back, I launched something called the Emotional Intelligence Lab. It is our institute, me and my partners, our institute for the integration of teaching people communication skills and emotional intelligence. Put them together. Don't have to do it with me. I'm encouraging you, wherever you go, learn communication and learn the science of emotional intelligence, because it'll help you deal with the adversity that we're going to face. It's always going to be there. So we lean into it. Let's recognize, embrace it, because if you fight it, it's going to fight you back and it's going to beat you. Don't let that happen.
Yes, you are rare, Chuck. You are a rare person on planet Earth, and it has been an honor and a privilege to be with you today, to learn from your many years of wisdom, experience, and how you can tie it into where we are right now as a world and where we're going in the future. I just encourage everyone to, you know, really get around great minds, great thinkers, get the book, you know, internalize and put yourself, which is what everyone that's listening today is doing. They made a decision to put themselves in an arena with other great people so that they can hear conversations and pull from it. So I love this. And I just really appreciate your time. And I thank you for being the rare people that go into the shark waters, but you didn't get eaten. You came out alive. And now you have a great story to tell, and you share it with the world. You're not closed up, but you are open to really helping the world become a better place. So thank you for that. We really value your time. And I know people have have just felt the blessing of your presence today. So thank you so much, Chuck, for your time.
Well, Sabrina, I thank you. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with you and to speak to your listeners. But the most important thing, what you do, Sabrina, you wake up and you go to work every day in the service of someone else's success. There's no higher call than that. And to all of you out there, I want to leave you with, think about that. Go to work in the service of someone else's success. Watch what happens. It's not magic.
It's truly, truly amazing. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sabrina. Signing off. Thank you very much. I am so happy to have worked with you here today.
Thank you. Awesome. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.